Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Nazir page 36, which, as we've been discussing, a Nazir is not allowed to consume wine, and if he would drink a certain measure, then that person would violate the Nazirus to the point that he would also get a punishment of lashes. Now, what happens if a person has a substantial amount of wine and it gets soaked into bread? Now, the bread itself, a Nazir is allowed to eat. On this, there is an opinion that even though the bread is allowed and the wine is not allowed, that you would think that the wine by itself is an insignificant amount or not enough to be able to reach the threshold of being punished. But nonetheless, in this case, we will say that it will combine, which is a tremendous idea, that if you have something which is forbidden, and a lot of it, and it gets soaked into the bread, which the bread itself is allowed, the bread itself, which is by itself permissible, is going to combine to reach the measure of a olive volume, and by doing so, this person will have violated having consumed wine, even though he actually had bread. And this is a concept that we are introduced here and is discussed actually in other places in the Talmud. And it gives a couple of other examples, and I'll share with you one, and then something that perhaps we could extrapolate for ourselves. When it comes to on Passover, a person we know is not allowed to have chametz. You're not allowed to eat bread. Now, what happens in the situation on Passover that a person doesn't have the total amount of bread, but let's say it gets mixed up with non-bread, right? Matzah, for example. So by itself, of course, you're allowed to, and there's nothing wrong, and it's a mitzvah to eat matzah on Passover. But the question is, if you have this forbidden mixture, which is you have the chametz, together with the matzah, which is fine, you have something which is forbidden, together with something which is allowed, but even the part that's allowed ends up getting connected and absorbed in part of the problem, so to speak, and therefore it will combine to you actually having violated eating a certain amount of chametz, which is quite fascinating, because if the prohibition of eating chametz on Passover is that you're not allowed to eat a certain measurement, you're not allowed to eat a kazayas or olive's volume, so you didn't do that. But nonetheless, we say that because there was so much chametz that got into and mixed in with non-chametz items, we say even the non-chametz item gets affected. And although this is not applicable to other situations in the Torah, we can understand that this is something that happens to us as well. That we, just like the matzah together with the chametz, or just like the bread, this little piece of bread which is totally soaked and saturated by forbidden wine for the Nazir, so to ourselves, we could be the same way. Ourselves being heter, good people, but if we become just like this bread, completely saturated and absorbed by negativity, it ends up affecting us as well. And therefore, even if we ourselves are fine, but if we allow negativity to go into us, we allow negativity to take hold and affect who we are, that's what ends up happening. So it becomes quite problematic. That even though it's true, I am a good person, but I am a product of my experiences and my environment. And therefore, perhaps just like this, we have to be extremely careful to not allow that which is forbidden to go inside of us. Because if we allow that, then it could actually overtake us completely, and even the good parts, unfortunately, get affected.